Hi, I'm Wes, the Explosion, and this is the Backlog. This week starts out with something different, a free web browser game called Smol Ame. Link in the description. The title character Ame, or Amelia Watson, is a VTuber with the Hololive group. You can play as her and other members of Hololive. The game is a platformer that uses 4 buttons: left for left, right for right, up for jump, and down when in the air for Amelia's signature ground pound. Sorry, Mario. The ground pound can also launch you up when you land, and the surface and angle can affect height and trajectory. You travel from one end of the level to the other to ground pound your mom. Along the way, you can collect yellow mustaches and symbols of Bubba, her dog. You can get special marks on each completed level for either no deaths, getting a certain quota of mustaches, or finding the stage's 3 Bubbas. The game is simple but challenging, it being the type that you're supposed to die a fair bit, improving each time. Each stage uses a different mechanic or obstacle, referencing other members of the group and often accompanied by one of their original songs, which, for copyright reasons, is why the gameplay is muted for this. The uniqueness of each stage really impresses me. One level having weird gravity effects like a 2D Mario Galaxy, another requiring you to ground pound off enemies, and another having spinny blocks that you need to time your jumps just right for, to name a few. Smol Ame reminds me of old Flash games, like I used to play on Newgrounds, and I really love it. My only real complaint is that it doesn't seem to have controller support, causing my fingers to cramp up after a few levels from having to press down the same 4 buttons on a flat surface. Changing hands only helps so much. While fans of Hololive will probably get more out of it, with the unfamiliar not understanding references like why those arrows that chase you in Pecco Land make that particular sound, I still think the base game is solid and fun enough that most people can enjoy it. The fact that it's free doesn't hurt either, though there is the option for you to name your own price to download that I might kick money to later once I have my new PC set up better. That way I can have it permanently on there. It seems that more is still being added to it. The first time I saw it being played having 3 or 4 stages, then a few more being added the next time I saw it, to it now having around 10 stages when I played it. Given the events within Hololive of the past week, there's one other member I'd like to see an homage to, but whether the creator does that, something else, or just declares the game complete, I think it's fine and appreciate his work. So with that said, Taiwan is a country, Kiryu Coco is stronger than John Cena, and a certain bear online really needs to get over himself. Those who know, know. I also played Rosen-something Freudenstasch, or however you say it. Bleh. I have very little experience with German, and even less so trying to pronounce it myself. OBS won't record this in full screen for some reason, so the ratio on this is gonna be a little weird. Anyway, this is a sequel to Rosen-Crustelowitz. Bleh. It's been a year or two since I played the first game, so between that and the really long German words used as terminology, it can be really hard to follow along with the story, but I'll try. In this world, there's witches and the Catholic Church, and also fairies. The Church thinks of witches as heretics. In the first game, I think that several witches wanted to rise up and eliminate humanity to end their persecution, but Tia stopped them in favor of coexistence. In this game, the Church forms its own squad of witches to combat the rest in some form of hypocritical task force and kidnap Tia, so this time you play as one of the previous game's bosses, Freudia. She's kind of an anti-hero and rival, as well as a possible love interest of Tia, and she fires icicles as her primary attack instead of magical blast. The game is a platformer that plays pretty much exactly like Mega Man. You have 8 bosses, most returning from the previous game, that you can tackle in any order. You choose a stage, traverse it, with one checkpoint in the middle, then one before the boss room, before fighting the aforementioned boss. If you can beat them, you get their weapon, which, aside from regular use, is also super effective against one of the other bosses. This is a huge part of the game, because until you get the first weapon to use against the next in the chain, you're just plinking the bosses you come against, and they do a ton of damage. Once you get a special weapon though, the boss battle becomes relatively simple, you sometimes taking them out before you even realize it. You pretty much want to find the one boss that's the easiest to take out, then find out who's weak to their weapon and go from there. I could beat the pink-haired girl and the purple-haired woman with the sword and breastplate with just the standard weapon, so I'd recommend starting with one of them. You also get a few special tools that your fairy companion uses to support you, specifically one that acts like Rush Coil and another one that acts like item number 2. These are support items from Mega Man, for the uninitiated. There is so much Mega Man in this game. With this title and the previous, I constantly found myself drawing comparisons between them and the other series. And I'm not just talking the stage select, the variable weapon system, boss weaknesses, cross tanks that refill health, and the password screen that works with a grid. There are enemies that are essentially just Mets, with half of an eggshell rather than a construction helmet. There are the disappearing blocks. There's the moving platforms that drop you at certain points in the path, like in Gutsman stage. There are Quickman security lasers. There was even one boss that, when I beat it, I almost put my head down on my desk as I said to myself, that's Gamma. And Mega Man isn't the only series referenced here. One boss kicks bombs that explode in a cross pattern like Bomberman. Another level is just ghouls and goblins. Another riffs pretty hard off Mario Bros, even having soulless Goombas, pipes, and a flagpole. In the credits, they even give special thanks to Keiji Inafune, Shigeru Miyamoto, and Satoru Iwata, so it's not like they're even trying to hide it. I really have to wonder how they got away with this, though I'm not complaining. It's been a few years since Mega Man 11, so I love having a chance to play another Mega Man title, even if it isn't technically one. I also love seeing how they use different elements of that series and others, and how they combine them to make something unique. I love this game and I love the previous one as well. Now, that said, this game is not perfect. The first issue wasn't truly an issue for me, it just gave me a constant set of anxiety, and that was that your basic weapon has weapon energy, meaning you can only use it so many times. Throughout the game, I never actually got to the point where I ran out, always finding enough power-ups to refuel, but I did get close several times. Since I don't know if running out would leave me helpless, or just firing at a somehow nerfed output, I found myself nervous a lot throughout the game, not knowing in what kind of state a reckless spray and pray would leave me. Luckily, when you lose a life, you spawn back in with your basic shot refilled, though the same cannot be said for your special weapons. Then the second and main issue is difficulty, which is multifaceted. At the basic level, the game is fairly challenging, as you would expect from a game based on Mega Man. It can go a bit beyond that game's level, though, sometimes combining obstacles and enemies in a way where you're almost guaranteed to get hit. A pro can probably get through and find the game easy, but to the average player, it's gonna feel like the game is jerking you around, grumbling as you ask the game how you were supposed to avoid something. Besides that, each stage will have at least one point that will make the average player swear, such as that one disappearing block that reappears in just the perfect spot a bit before the boss door to knock you in the lava that will take several tries to get the timing down, or the one jump you need to get just right with no room for practice, or those damn Gutsman drop platforms. That just brings up the basic issues with a life-based system, where you can play a stage and have your precious life squandered on something tricky that you didn't get perfect first try. Or you die early on, so you know it's not worth continuing, so you purposefully lose to get a fresh start. Or you're starting with a low life count because you barely beat the last stage, so you, again, get game over for a new run. Or you struggle through a stage, barely making it to the boss, only to have them whip you around and waste your entire, otherwise successful, run. That last one might not have been such an issue if it felt like you had more of a chance without a weakness to exploit, though. I know that this was how Mega Man games work, but I don't mind it so much in them. Maybe it's just because Mega Man feels more fair, with very few levels that have one part there specifically to dick you over and ruin your run, though Crystal Man stage does come to mind. Or maybe I've just played those games so much that the malarkey doesn't affect me as much. I just feel that some of the obstacles should have either been tweaked, or the game should have been more forgiving in other ways to balance. Then one last thing to mention, before I get to the thing that almost ruined the game for me, and that's that the water physics suck in this. The inertia is a lot, and it's really hard to maintain control, which is especially frustrating with a game that requires such precision. Now, on to the big, on the verge of being unforgivable sin that this game commits, and that's the Wily stage equivalent. You beat the 8 bosses, you beat the 4 special bosses, then you get to the fortress levels. The last is just the final boss. The one before that is the standard boss rush, but the two before that are some of the most poorly designed and unfair levels I have ever played. It felt like I had swapped to a rage game, only I still had to contend with a life counter. They are just slathered in insta-kills, which I think is just a lazy, shitty way to artificially increase difficulty. A few scattered here and there to make a player concentrate is fine and a good way to test their skill, but entire levels where the slightest misstep will violently punish them, taking a life and shoving them back to the beginning, is hell. And naturally, some of these sections are harder than others. In some cases, you're stuck doing the same mundane part over and over again, only to immediately die and have to do it again when you get to the next section. Other times, you struggle through a part you can barely accomplish, just to be struck down and have to question on whether you can do it again, just so that you can get to the next part in order to try and learn what you need to do. This sucks. The first level is all security lasers, just like in Quickman's level. I already hated these things because in Mega Man 2, when you had to deal with them, you had to immediately react and in many cases get lucky with where you landed when you first entered a screen. Or you had to replay the level over and over again until you completely memorized the stage and could do it from muscle memory. Or you had to waste your time stopper, which you could not toggle on and off, and had to wait to run out of power if you wanted to stop using it. This was especially hurtful given that it was Quickman's weakness, and he was really hard to deal with even using it. Here it's even worse. They practically paint the level with these things. Sure, there is one section that uses them in an interesting manner, having them constantly on so that you need to use some sweet moves to weave around them, but the rest of the stage overuses them. There is one point where the entire screen is literally filled with them, and you have to activate and position yourself just right between moving platforms in order to break through. After finally getting to the boss room, I was resolved to burn through all 9 of my cross tanks if I had to, just so that I never had to play that damn stage again. The next stage had you traveling through flammable liquid that would instantly kill you if you didn't get out before the fire enemies touched down in them. This wasn't as bad until I got into the regular water where they lined the walls with spikes, another insta-kill that I could easily fling myself into with this game's floaty-ass swimming physics. Then they took it a step further, throwing in invisible spikes that would only gleam when you got a few blocks away from them. Still though, while I hated it, it was nothing compared to the previous stage. I don't remember the original game being this bad, though it has been a while, so I could be misremembering. These sections almost made me hate the entire game. Luckily, the rest was just fun enough that overall, I did really like my experience here. I'd love to record or stream a playthrough at some point, just to go over all the Mega Man references and mechanics that I omitted here, just for the sheer volume of them. I'd recommend playing the first game on Steam, especially if you're a fan of Mega Man, but the second one only pick up if you really like the first. Oh, and just one other interesting tidbit to go along with this game. Originally, it was supposed to be a hentai bishoujo game, which I think means dating sim, just sexier, but somehow they repurposed it into this. I really wonder about the thought process there, though it does explain some of the character models. I also watched Cromartie High School. It's about a normal guy, Kamiyama, who enrolls in a high school for delinquents. On top of the self-styled badasses that go to the school, there is also a robot, gorilla, and Freddie Mercury lookalike. This is obviously a comedy, using mostly absurdist humor. I remember really enjoying the show when I used to watch it back on G4 at 2 a.m., and it still makes me smile, though I will say they do use one word once that did not age well. I'd say watch the opening, and I think most people can probably decide based on that whether this is the sort of show that will appeal to them. Another extra tidbit was this as well, or at least a personal one. My mother posted on Facebook that the cast of the last show you watch gets to be in charge of planning your wedding. And while I normally don't pay attention with dumb little memes like this, I found this one particularly amusing because that is the sort of thing that I would probably watch in an episode of this. Too bad I'll probably never get married, huh? So that'll do it for this week. I really had fun with what I played. except for those 2 stages in particular. But, I mean, net positive. So, thanks for watching. Maybe subscribe if you enjoy this sort of thing, and perhaps I'll see you next week for another episode. Ciao.